So he starts off chapter 10 by saying, every child grows up longing for a good yarn, a good tale, a good story. The lure of a fantastic story captivates us from the earliest ages. Gripping plots complete with monsters and mysteries, heroes and villains, set in whimsical landscapes where dangers lurk about, dark forests and magical swords, free fair maidens, or, if you're not a fantasy person, pew-pew lasers, space battles, aliens. Reading to my girls, I'm like, oh, are you here yet? Can I read the story again? Because I want to read it again.
Yeah,
the Phantom Toll Booth. I want to read the Hobbit. No, you're bored with it? You cannot be bored with it. It is against family law to be bored with the Phantom Toll Booth. All right, well, we just have to wait a little lot longer. But these are not silly flights of fancy, gratuitous forms of escapism. They are otherworldly tales that help children frame this worldly reality as they learn their place in it. And such stories are most certainly not confined to the children.
Right, they're for us as well.
Right.
And so what in the world's going on here with all this story talk, right? I thought, as you mentioned, we're talking about dealing with the problem of evil. Well, he says in order to make sense of God's design for evil in this world, he wants to begin by directing our attention to the realm of story, right? He believes that the answer to the broader question of evil's entrance into God's good creation is embedded in the grand storyline of Scripture, wherein every truth of the Christian faith, including evil, finds its place. So Scripture now is story is how he's going to kind of use that as a placeholder to help him to work through these various issues with the problem of evil. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, he says the broad themes of the storyline in Scripture in terms of creation, fall, and redemption are surprisingly mirrored, he tells us, in the whole history of storytelling. Right? Go figure, right?
Yeah.
The architectonics, he says, of storytelling demonstrate the universal longing for redemption from the conflict that we call evil. Mm-hmm. So he's going to talk about here how story and storytelling works within Scripture, the source of it, and how that is going to help him to work through this problem of evil.
Yeah.
Right?
And we've seen this, or you probably maybe know this if you're in the world of Jordan Peterson. He kind of takes this kind of meta-narrative approach and says, what can we draw from Scripture that informs us about humanity? I said this either, depending on where I put the Q&A that we just did, I either said it or will say it, and it's brilliant. You should listen to it, or you should listen to it again because it was brilliant. And so he says, what can we as humans learn from these stories that the human condition is written or understood, or there may be some historical aspects to it, but what's the overall kind of ley lines of a story that we see within the life of Noah or Moses or Abraham or Jesus. If you want a kind of a Christian aspect, there's a podcast by J.D. Wilson called Stories Are Soul Food podcast. And so they do kind of this look at it from a Christian worldview point of view. So I had a lot of fun listening to their stuff as well. And so that's part of what we're incorporating here. But we've also, if you're an expanded reader of C.S. Lewis or Tolkien, if you read The Inklings, which I did a review on last year, which the review can be found on our blog. The Inklings, the group that C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were a part of, they talked about this stuff very highly. And they talked about myths, which we'll get into later, and they didn't shy away from those terms or anything like that, and so they built their stories with kind of this understanding that he's going to go into. So why do we need stories? God has endowed us with a unique gift among His creatures, the gift of language, and the highest art of language is storytelling. Even if you take this from a secular point of view of molecules demand type idea. This is something that
that's a story.
Yeah, that a lot of them,
I call that a creation myth, right? These
cave drawings that occur that tell about the hunt. These come into play here, and why are we doing that? It's because that's part of our nature is this storytelling language aspect. We're not just communicating, I see a bear over there, but let me tell you about this bear. And the fish story, I caught a fish this big. Well, it was actually this big. If I'm going to be honest, if I'm going to be humble, it was this big. Those are the types of stories that we're talking about too. So the urge to tell stories is clearly one of the distinguishing marks of human existence. We've been doing it for a while. We're still doing it. We're making good money off of it too. Animals communicate instinctively to one another about approaching dangers, about where to find food, water, and other necessities, but they do not regale their companions with tall tales of the grand hunt or romantic rendezvous in the forest. But for humans, stories are primal. And this isn't just books, this is movies, this is radio dramas for those that remember radio dramas, and all sorts of things that are occurring where we're telling stories, and they don't have to be all fiction. We're kind of, when you listen to a true crime podcast or a true crime story, you get here are the players, here's the rise in action, the murder happens, and now another storyline breaks off of that, and now you're on the case.
Yeah.
And did the person do it? Did they not? I think someone was set up here. The cops are bad, but then the bad guy is bad, but maybe not. Oh, here's the confession and the decline in action and the conclusion. That's the story we put even into the a murder occurred today. It was very sad. They were survived by this person. This person was put on trial. No. The story that we tell within the confines, even in a court case, a good lawyer says, tell a story. You're telling a story to people.
Yeah.
That's how the prosecutors, the defense attorneys connect with the jury. They tell stories. Yeah, that's exactly what lawyers say.
Yeah. And so Christensen asked the question, why are we captivated by stories? Why do we need them? And he says, the reason is to make sense of our place in the world. We automatically assemble our fragmented experiences, he tells us, together in kind of a sensible and satisfying narrative, right? We have a propensity for framing a constellation of the most important, exciting, and even disturbing threads of our lives, each converging and ebbing, he tells us, and flowing to a clear destination, right? And attended with various successes and hardships. We just, that's the way we're made. Mm-hmm. We're framed that way. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just reading kind of a collection of 10 stories for young adult readers, and it's 15 pages, and it's these kind of famous people within history, and they start out with childhood, they go into teenage years, they go to kind of what they're famous for, and then they died. Okay, that's kind of a boring story, but within 15 pages, they talk about, in childhood, this tragedy informed what they would do. Here's something that they saw or learned about or experienced that informed what they would do. Here's something within what they were doing that they look back upon their childhood and said, I was like this person who's coming to me saying, why does this peanut grow really, really good? Or, what do we see out in nature that you're able to deal with these very sick people, and you saw it happen worse, and you developed tools to treat it better. Within 15 pages, it's wow. This rising action conclusion that's really, really neat to see.